Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our first meeting since the general election. Tonight we have three outstanding speakers. Our politicians, Tim Aker and Redwood, achieved remarkable results in the general election. It's not surprising, as they both relate particularly well to the aspirations of the voters. But ladies and gentlemen, just cast your minds back a few years to when the so-called modernisers in the Conservative Party set out their agenda for electoral success. It consisted of not banging on about Europe. Europe and the prospect of a referendum was a central issue in the general election. They also said we mustn't advocate tax cuts, never speak about immigration, and never talk about cutting public expenditure. Indeed, one Conservative MP, you may remember, Howard Flight, was banned from standing for the Conservative Party because he argued that Labour's spending plans should be reduced by a mere 20 billion. Banging on about the European Union and advocating a smaller public sector with lower taxes being a consequence seems to have been a pretty good way to achieve electoral success in the 2015 general election. However, Mr. Miliband clung to his belief that Labour's spending plans prior to the financial crash were not excessive. But he may have been encouraged to do that because the then leader of the opposition and the Shadow Chancellor specifically endorsed those plans. Quite remarkable, isn't it? But now Mr. Miliband can repent at his leisure. Tonight, I'm going to call upon our first speaker to be Tim Aker. Tim is the UKIP member of the European Parliament for the Eastern region. He first came to prominence as campaign director of Get Britain Out. What a wonderful name for an organisation. And then served as head of the UKIP policy unit. Tim is a strong friend of the Bruges group and has moved from a regular member of the audience to one of our most valued platform speakers. I judged Thurrock the constituency most likely to be a UKIP gain. And a week before polling day, it looked, Tim, as if you might just do it. But in the end, you were just 900 tantalising votes short. Nonetheless, as the UKIP candidate, your vote in that constituency rose from 7% in the 2010 general election to 32% in the 2015. And a lot of that result was due to your personal commitment, hard work, and dedication to the cause. I'm most grateful to you for coming this evening, and I welcome you as our first speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Aker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have come first in another public speaking engagement a few weeks ago, but there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening. I'm encouraged by what we've seen over the past few weeks. And as you all will know, timing in politics is everything. So imagine my surprise that a few days after the general election, the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, confirmed what UKIP and Nigel Farage had said all along. They'd said that uncontrolled mass immigration from Eastern Europe is depressing wages in the United Kingdom. And time after time, I'd hear in the estates and the communities in Thurrock that this was the problem. That it was leading to no pay increases. It was leading to economic stagnation and a concrete ceiling for many British workers. Now, why would he say that? Why would he wait so long to say that? We've been talking about that for years. We've been talking about wages not improving. We've been talking about it and our vote in Labour constituencies in my part of Thurrock, in Tilbury and Chadwell, where UKIP won. Our vote was increasing. Now, why would he wait so long to say that? Perhaps it did not fit with the establishment plan to close ranks around the Conservative Party, to ignore the mass immigration issue and focus more on the deals to be done after the election between Labour and the Scottish National Party. I often say, in my estimation of David Cameron, that you can only judge a horse by its form. So I judge a Prime Minister to defend England against the SNP when he's hurled money hand over fist over Hadrian's Wall and talks, but does very little to ensure English votes for English laws. With a record like that, I and many of my constituents and many people in the English Eastern region and many people in this country ask, how can we trust David Cameron in any renegotiation and any EU referendum? Renegotiations must be between two opposites trying to come to a compromise. That is, if it is to become a renegotiation. But what we've got are two sides quite happy with the status quo. They are, in reality, both happy with our EU membership. As a net contributor to the EU, Mr Juncker is perfectly happy for Britain to send money to the EU and provide jobs for the EU's mass unemployed, made worse by the Eurozone crisis. And let's remember, David Cameron whipped his own MPs to stay in the EU and deny us a referendum early in the last Parliament. Even now, he will not allow ministers the vital freedom to speak their minds on this vital issue to our country. Spot the difference. The only factor to have brought them to the renegotiating table is Nigel Farage and UKIP. It's our rise, it's our 4 million votes, it's our victory in the European elections, our hundreds of new councillors, our soaring membership, our stances on immigration, on direct democracy, on sensible economics and positive patriotism. All of that has been a threat to the status quo. Hence, we're here where we are. We've got the charade of a renegotiation. Shadowboxing, while people wonder whether we're going to get what David Cameron says he's going to ask for. But only UKIP has forced him to the renegotiating table. We all know that David Cameron has no inclination to get immigration under control. Just look at the man's record. Heir to Blair, I thought that was spin, but apparently it was a threat. His immigration record it matches Blair's at his worst. We know, I've sat not far from Jean-Claude Juncker in the European Parliament when he said it, that the EU simply will not countenance any renegotiation on free movement of peoples across the European Union. Any talk of eliminating freedom of movement from the EU's fundamental freedoms is not up for discussion. So what we've got is a drama playing out in front of us. It's a manufactured set of red lines that will probably change during the course of referendum. Imagine the campaign. We all will fight for an outvote, won't we? Yes. No, Downing Street's only down there. They didn't hear you. Will we fight for an outvote? Yes. There we go. One more time. Come on. Yes. Good. We will fight for an outvote. But imagine in the final few days of the campaign, we'll see it. Just imagine the three chairs up on the table. You'll have David Cameron, you'll have whichever non-entity Labour chooses their next leader, and whatever non-entity the Lib Dems choose, saying, stay with us, we can get you a better deal. We will actually reform free movement, but you must vote for an in vote. Now, go back to the referendum on Scottish independence and see the same tired old parties offering the same old con, and just think, we've been here before. We have seen what they've done, we know your game, and I tell you what, I don't care whether you hear us here, whether you hear us in Thurrock, whether you hear us in the Eastern region or the United Kingdom, we know your game and we are not going to fall for it. We know the old parties, along with the SNP, want to stay in the EU. But the only true voice of withdrawal, the only consistent one, has been and remains Nigel Farage and UKIP. But where does that leave the likes of the Conservative Eurosceptics? Some esteemed voices, and those who have been fighting for Euroscepticism over the years. I mean, I've read John Redwood's books, I think I've got every single one, and I couldn't disagree with a word of them. But do we actually stand for politicians who talk about EU withdrawal, but then pledge loyalty to a Prime Minister who fundamentally believes in EU membership? As a member of a party wanting one thing, they are advocates of the opposite view. A man cannot serve two masters, so which is it? Your party or this country? Let's go back to judging horses by their form, and let's look at their recent actions. We are only here having this debate about the future of the EU, the UK and a referendum because of the pressure exerted by Nigel Farage and UKIP. If we did not exist, then frankly we would not even be talking about a referendum, let alone realising and discussing plans to leave the EU. This referendum is Nigel Farage and UKIP's achievement, a victory for the UKIP's People's Army that has shaken the establishment to its core, and long may it continue. Even the harshest critic of UKIP must surely understand we are only on the verge of a referendum because of Nigel. So why all these voices from the Tory press, from the same old Tory rebels and Eurosceptics who report to David Cameron, to sideline the only politician in the UK who can bring in new voters to the polls, who can communicate a message to people switched off from the old politics, a politician who has revived the concept of the public meeting? To me, what is to be gained from sidelining Nigel? The only thing to me, it seems it's the long-term survival of the Conservative Party and nothing else. It's what the Conservative Party did to Margaret Thatcher when she twigged what the EC was up to, and now they're trying to do the same to Nigel Farage. There is now a clear, irreconcilable tension between the pro-EU fabric of David Cameron's Conservative Party and the cause of withdrawal. The Tories are united in their fear of a public debate between David Cameron, who wants to stay in the EU, and Nigel Farage, who wants to leave. Now this time there can be no seven-way debates. No hiding, it'll have to be one-on-one. And I love the fact. And everyone, Tory or not, Eurosceptic or Europhile, everyone knows that David Cameron will get a right royal clegging from Nigel Farage. But all Conservatives, whether pro or anti-EU, are frightened of this. So they are trying to sideline the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, and ensure the one-on-one debate never takes place. All of them put protecting Cameron above leaving the European Union. To any observer, it is starkly clear that the Out campaign has to be led by the man who won us the opportunity in the first place. Others clearly have a vital role, and a multi-pronged campaign is invaluable. The work of Matthew Elliott, a man I worked with for many years at the Taxpayers Alliance, who is now working with Business for Britain, an invaluable organisation, who set up Economists for Britain, Historians for Britain. That is just what our campaign needs. There must be strong contributions from business, industry, trade unions, pressure groups, even, and most fundamentally, the esteemed Bruges group who have kindly invited me here tonight. But when one looks for political leadership, there can only be one choice, the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage. Now, I have spent many, many weeks, months, years campaigning in Thurrock, which was a bellwether seat. My victorious opponent had a majority of 92. And in 2010, there was a turnout of 59%. That went up to just shy of 66%. I lost count of the number of people who came up to me saying, I've not voted before, but I'm voting for UKIP. I've not bothered to listen to the other politicians, but I listen to Nigel Farage. I know what you guys stand for. I know what the other people stand for. I remember in Grays, which is the metropolitan hub of Thurrock, where 15 years ago, in a council by-election, when the only choices were blue, yellow and red, that the turnout in a local council by-election was 8%. 8%. If we are going to win this referendum, we need to reach out. We need to reach out to people who gave up on politics. We need to reach out to the people who thought that the establishment, everyone who had MP, MEP, councillor, whatever, before or after their name, we need to reach out to those people who gave up on politics. And from what I've seen, working closely with Nigel Farage, is that he is the man to do it. He may not be the man for everyone, but he is the one to bring new people to the polls, because this referendum is our once-in-a-generation time to get our country back. And if we do not use every resource possible, then we are not just betraying this generation, we are betraying future generations who rely on us to save their independence. Britain needs to find its self-confidence again. When we launched our campaign for the general election in Canvey Island, we said, we believe in Britain. It's not the longest of election slogans, but in the time I've been interested in politics, it's one that meant the most, not just to me, but to the hundreds, thousands of people that I met in Thurrock. Millions joined that campaign, and we can look to the future and realise that because we believe in Britain, our best days are ahead of us. Our approach needs to be positive, that we can do more as an independent nation. We cannot give in to any fear tactics and the Tory machine of saying that we must be afraid of embracing the wider world, as they used in the general election to keep us in the European Union. For the last 50 years, this country has been told by its leaders that our institutions, built up across generations, aren't fit for purpose. But for hundreds of years, until the 1950s, a self-confident nation led the world on everything that mattered: the rule of law, constitutional democracy, political reform, technical revolution, even the abolition of slavery. We were there leading the way. The political class since the 1950s has given up on Britain. England is now ignored, and it is being turned into city regions by this Conservative government, a ploy that Tony Blair tried and failed. Think about that for a minute, and then think about the party that is trusting you with British sovereignty. Scotland now holds the Union to hostage. It is therefore vital for the longevity of the Union to introduce English votes for English laws and do away with the Barnett formula, so that the majority in England does not feel so aggrieved that they end the Union themselves. Should the current direction of travel continue, then that would not be an unsurprising nor an undesirable outcome. All the while this is going on, we're in a political union with 27 other countries, pouring billions away in fees and foreign aid, while our own constituents, my own constituents, your own neighbours, friends and colleagues, have to seek help at food banks and face wage depression. How can any of us look our colleagues, friends and neighbours in the eye while that is going on? We have to do the right thing. Our politics is broken, but those who broke it are going to ask you for your support and your trust to keep Britain in the European Union and sideline those who brought about this referendum. This referendum is our opportunity, the once-in-a-generation chance to put this country on the right course. But I would argue it goes further than that. If the country has the good sense to choose the right way, we can sweep away the political class that got us in this mess and look forward, once and for all, to a brighter future for our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is John Redwood. He also achieved a remarkable result in the general election in his Wokingham constituency. The result could never have been in doubt, but the turnout rose to a remarkable 72%. John achieved a 10% swing, and his nearest challenger was some 44% behind him in the poll. John's brand of conservatism could not have received a more ringing endorsement. The policies and strategies that John Redwood has advocated for the Conservative Party over the past 20 years have been broadly endorsed by the electorate in the 2015 general election. It's been regrettable that over a number of years, many of the leading figures in that party have been so reluctant to accept the reforming, free market and self-governing strategy for the United Kingdom that John has been advocating. Today, the role that John has set himself in guiding the Conservative Party in the right direction has never been more important. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to welcome the Right Honourable John Redwood, Member of Parliament.
I speak for prosperity, not for austerity. And I speak to restore our once mighty democracy. I want to live in a country which finds the right means so that everyone has an opportunity. I want to live in a country where those who work hard and train themselves and become skilled can earn good money and keep most of it for their families and their own purposes. Above all, I want to live in a country where if the electors decide that they want change, if the voters decide that some problem needs fixing, their sovereign parliament can fix it. And if their sovereign parliament is deaf or blind and does not fix it, then I want to live in a country where the people in that sovereign parliament are removed by the electors and those who can see and hear are elected. One of the worst features of the European scheme that is unrolling and sometimes unravelling before our eyes on the continent is that we now see in many countries general elections take place where electors strongly urge change of policy. Very often the electors, as in Greece, maybe soon in Spain, wish to banish austerity. They wish for themselves and their families that opportunity, that chance of a job, that chance of a better job that we begin to take for granted in the United Kingdom. They elect a government which is different, but the new government cannot make the changes that the people want and the economy needs because they are under European Euro control. As one of those who worked with many of you to make the mighty case that a sovereign country had to have its own single currency and won that battle, Britain is in a much better position than Greece or Portugal or Spain. We today don't face 50% youth unemployment. We don't face 25% general unemployment. And where something needs fixing in the British economy, a British government and an independent central bank still have considerable powers and measures that they can take to put things right. But what we also know is that because we are on the edges of the Euro scheme, but heavily committed by treaty to other parts of the common government of the European Union, there now are an increasing number of issues where the British people want change, but where no elected government is able to carry out that change fully, or in some cases at all. In the last general election, many voters in the United Kingdom made clear that they wanted two changes above all. They wanted change to the numbers of people that we welcome into our country. Many of us are very happy that we have an open society and that new people come and join us. The issue is not that we dislike foreigners, the issue is the number of people that we can accept at any given time and how we can then make provision. How can we build the houses, provide the schools and hospitals that new people require? And there is a general feeling in the country, identified by several parties in the election, that the numbers are too big and that we need to have new policies which control it, but we are finding it difficult to gain that control because of the free movement provisions and the court judgments of the European Union. We also, in that general election, heard from many people that whilst we are a generous country, whilst we wish to live in a country where there is money from the state for those who are disabled, those who fall on hard times, those who can't find the job they want, we want to live in a decent country with decent welfare. We also think that there are some excesses and some problems that need changing, and people were particularly worried about whether people would simply arrive in our country and clock on for all the welfare before they'd made a contribution and lived with us for a bit. And it was a popular policy mentioned by several political groups and parties that there needed to be change. And again, it is by no means clear how far we can go in changing that important matter. How much tax do you pay? Who do we pay the tax money to under the current European Union rules? That is why I and many of my colleagues had urged Mr. Cameron in the last Parliament that he needed to change policy in two very important ways. And we urged him, after the rebel vote on the referendum that we undertook early in the Parliament, that we needed to have a referendum, that it had been a long time since the British people had been asked to express their view on our relationship with the rest of Europe, and that when that matter had been put, to those amongst us who were old enough to have voted in it, it was put in terms of belonging to something called a common market. And no one can claim that what we now belong to is just a common market. It isn't even a very common market. It is a set of legal structures regulating trade and business, some of them helpful, some of them unhelpful, but it is part of a much more comprehensive scheme of emerging European government. So we put to Mr. Cameron that he should change his mind on a referendum, and he graciously agreed that he should. We also put to him that it would be a good idea, in order to demonstrate to the British people that he had tried, that he should seek to negotiate a new relationship with our partners, which the British people might welcome. This seemed to us to offer several great advantages. I know there are some here who would rather just leave the European Union tomorrow. I have to tell you, you have not attracted enough support for that proposal, and there is no majority in the House of Commons for that proposal, and that should be of interest and concern to you. The route we have chosen may take a little longer, may be more subtle than some of you wish, but it is meant well, and I ask you to hear me out and to understand the journey we are embarked upon. If we have undertaken, as we are now attempting to do, a serious negotiation, one of two outcomes are possible. It is possible that the other members of the European Union will be so worried by the fact that the British people could well vote to leave, that they will satisfy those crucial issues which I have already posed. As far as I'm concerned, what do I want from a renegotiation? I want the restoration of the sovereignty of the British people. I don't have a shopping list. Today it's borders. Tomorrow it may be welfare. Next year it may be energy. And you cannot prejudge all the things that might cause problems and negotiate a happy answer to all of them at the moment. To me, the issue is who ultimately decides, where does the control rest? And if we get a solution which opts us out of those parts of the treaty that are federalising and centralising, that would be a win. But if, as many of you think, there is no such sensible deal on offer, do you not see that it would be much easier to persuade our fellow citizens that we must leave the European Union, because a serious-minded, intelligent Prime Minister had done his best to try and deal with the obvious difficulties that many British people find with our current membership, and if he is unable to deal with those issues, then it will be that much easier to persuade the necessary number of people to vote no in a referendum. Now, we know that 13% of the public would vote to leave tomorrow because they voted UKIP to make that point in the general election. We need to win at least 51% of the electorate voting in the referendum. But winning by 51%, though it would do the job, leaves a very divided and troubled country. We want to live in a happy country. We want to live in a democratic country. And in a democratic country, you don't develop your democracy by having ever smaller groups of people with ever purer views. You develop your democracy by spreading your main message ever wider so that more and more people buy in to what you're trying to do. So that is my first main message to all of you. I'm sure you are men and women of goodwill. I'm sure, like me, you wish to live in a flourishing British democracy. You, like me, find the current treaty structure and some of the rules and requirements of the European Union unacceptable and incompatible with your vision of what a future British democracy should be like. But you still have a long way to go to persuade 60 or 70% of the British people that we need this fundamental change. And I and my colleagues can give you that opportunity to make that case. We can work with you and help make that case, but it is not going to make that case if we argue about ideological purity, if we have factional struggles and disagreements, if we try and reenact the last election and say, wouldn't it have been better if the result had been different? The result is the result, ladies and gentlemen. In a democracy, the result means that is the view of the British people, and they are wise. Would I have liked my party to have got more votes than it got? Of course I would. What do I learn from that? I learn from that I and my party have to get better at understanding what the British people want and meeting their needs and demonstrating our competence at governing them. Any party that lost that general election has to learn even more from that general election, because it must mean that they were saying and doing more things that were annoying more people, and that just concentrating on repeating what they said to attract those who did vote for them is unlikely to be a successful strategy for ensuring more votes in the future. So what we have to do together, if we wish to work together, and I hope we do, is we now have to take advantage of where we now find ourselves. Don't argue about why we are where we are, because we may disagree about that. Let's just welcome the fact that we today, as Eurosceptics, are in a transformed position to the position we were in 6 months ago under the coalition government, and an even more transformed position than where we were 6 years ago under a Labour government. We are now not discussing how Britain will succumb to yet another European Union treaty. We are not now discussing about how Britain would go along with big increases in the European budget or is looking to cooperate with partners to increase Europe's powers. We are now talking about whether our Prime Minister, and he is your Prime Minister as well as my Prime Minister, so please get behind him on this. We are talking about whether he can get any serious powers back from Brussels or not. And we are talking about, if he's unable to do so, we have the unchallenged right to persuade enough of our fellow citizens that enough is enough, that our democracy is incompatible with their treaties, and that we would rather leave. Now, we will find plenty of people on the yes side out there campaigning already. I think we can't stop them, but in a way we should welcome it. They're first of all jumping the gun. The point we should make publicly is that anyone who starts campaigning to stay in today, before we know whether the Prime Minister has decent powers back or any kind of a deal, is undermining our Prime Minister. If you wish to negotiate successfully, the impression has to be given to our partners in the European Union that Britain is likely to pull out unless there is a fundamental change in the relationship, unless enough is changed in the treaties that apply to Britain for most British people to think it's now a reasonable deal. So those who campaign for yes too soon are undermining our country's position, trying to get a better deal. They're also revealing the paucity and the dishonesty of their argument. The main argument I hear all the time is that 3 million jobs could be at risk if we left the European Union, because one academic once calculated that around 3 million people work in exports of goods and services that are sold into other European Union countries. Now, that academic never said that if we left the European Union, all those jobs would go, because it is a flagrantly absurd proposition to advance. And you don't need to believe John Redwood on this. Why not just ask the German finance minister, because he has recently said that he would like Britain to stay in the European Union. Of course he would, because we make a big financial contribution and we often are on Germany's side. He said that nonetheless, were we to leave, of course Germany would want a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. But of course Germany would, because Germany sells us twice as much as we sell Germany. And you don't normally threaten your customers with cutting off their supply. You normally woo your customers and persuade them that your goods are worth buying. And you don't normally place tariffs on the goods you're trying to sell to other people. I can't believe the Germans would want to slap a 10% motor tariff on Mercedes and Audis being sold into the United Kingdom. And assuming I'm right about that, seems to be the view of the German finance minister, nor would they therefore slap a 10% tariff on Nissans or Land Rovers going the other way, because Germany sells us far more cars than we sell them, and Germany, as the finance minister has wisely said, believes in free trade. So I think we can deal with this very odd proposition that they keep advancing. And if the BBC and others are still not persuaded, we can of course remind them that similar people to those now making this case from great multinational companies told us very strongly in the 1980s that we had to join the European exchange rate mechanism to be more prosperous. They got their way and it crippled our economy and did huge damage to their companies and their profits. And they're not satisfied with getting that wrong. Many of them went on to get the euro wrong. And they told us very firmly, don't I remember it only too well, in the 1990s that people like me were jeopardizing Britain's future by keeping us out of the euro. And they told us that great companies would cancel their investments, some would close their factories or take their financial business to Frankfurt and Paris, and that Britain would be belittled by staying out of the euro. Well, that didn't work out quite as they forecast either. I'm delighted to say that in the noughties, despite having a Labour government, it wasn't all bad, the Labour government, just quite a bit of it, they still carried on investing in Britain in quite a big way, because Britain was competitive, it had a good workforce, was making good motor cars or other products, and so the investment continued. And far from the city being killed by our refusal to go into the euro, the city became an even bigger centre in Europe and took the biggest share of all the euro business, although we were not in the currency. So, ladies and gentlemen, be of good cheer. Be optimistic. Look happy. Don't spend all your time criticising each other in this room, because more actually unites you than disunites you. Now is our opportunity. However we've got here, some have made a bigger contribution than others to getting to where we are today. We have these two fantastic changes that are great news. We have a Prime Minister that is trying to get powers back and a better deal, rather than a Prime Minister that's constantly giving powers away and giving us a worse deal. And we have the opportunity to say we don't like the deal if he is unsuccessful or if he falls short of your expectations for him. So this is the proposition. Get behind him. See that your interests and his are, for the time being, entirely aligned. And then see that you have a decision point as he has a decision point. And at that decision point, when we know what the deal is, then we will all decide whether we are outers or inners. And we will go off into our respective campaigns, and then we have to unite to fight. And if we are, in this room, all going to end up in the out campaign, and a lot of people here think that is very likely, we then have to have the best faces and the best arguments, the people who are best able to win over the 20-30% of people who are not very sure. And it will be a question of reassurance. We have to reassure them that their jobs are not at risk. We have to reassure them that we can be more prosperous outside the EU because we can do our own trade deals with a wider range of countries, and that we only have to apply the EU rules to the things we sell to France and Germany. We no longer have to apply to them to the things we sell to ourselves or to others if the rules make no sense. We have to tell them why it matters. We have to explain to them that this is in the end about whether you want to live in a democratic country that can be self-governing or not. It is a very simple proposition that we have to get across. And so I repeat it again. Let us tell the British people that if they want to live in a country where if something matters to them, they can get it fixed, then we need to change our arrangements with the EU in a fundamental way. If we wish to restore our democracy, the answer cannot be, you must not control your borders because the EU won't want you. The answer has to be, have a debate in Parliament and decide what is the fairest way of controlling your borders. If you want to change your benefit arrangements, again, the British people should give their instructions to politicians in an election, and then the politicians governing should come together and decide how to fix it without external intervention. That is my vision. Prosperity, not austerity. More independence for a self-governing Britain. A proud democracy. It is a priceless prize which is close. It is near. Unite and fight and we can win it. Disagree with each other and you may well lose.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is Peter Oborn. Peter is one of the outstanding journalists of his generation. He is now the associate editor of The Spectator. In February of this year, he resigned from the Daily Telegraph due to his concerns regarding the relationship between the editorial and the commercial arms of that newspaper. Peter possesses that rare quality of putting principle before self. The high standard of Peter's journalism was recently recognised in another field when he was awarded the Wisden Book of the Year Award for Wounded Tiger, a history of cricket in Pakistan. A more difficult book to write, I suspect, than his earlier award-winning work on the D'Oliveira affair. Wisden praised Peter's book as one of the most important and compelling and altogether admirable books of recent years. It described his reportage as meticulous. It's a standard which applies also to his political journalism and his television documentaries. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to welcome one of our outstanding journalists in Britain today, Peter Oborn.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Barry, and thank you to the other two speakers from whom I learnt an enormous amount. We're here today just at the beginning of a great, what will turn into a great moment in our national history. Thanks to the Conservative win of the general election, we are now a clear Conservative win. We are now going to have a referendum, and we're going to be able to choose the destiny of our nation. And it's a very profound moment. And I thought it might be helpful to just talk about my own predicament, because I think it summarises the predicament of many people. And that is that, firstly, I just simply say that as a journalist, well, as a commentator most of the time, you don't take positions. You should try and be impartial. But I think this is so great an issue that at some point, if I'm an honourable man, will take a position on this, either yes or in or out. And it's because it so has such bearing on everything that we are. Secondly, it's a very difficult decision to make. Because up to now, for the last 30 years, I've been a Eurosceptic journalist. I've sort of generally gone around bashing the pro-Europeans. It's been a very easy blood sport. And there's been lots of things to bash them for. And suddenly, but it's been a whole series of free hits, because one's never been able to, needed to, set out the alternative and what it would be like outside the European Union, and make the argument that Britain can survive outside Europe. Now, at some stage in the next 2 years, I'm going to, and I suspect quite a lot of my colleagues, again, I have to decide which way to go. And I did think that Mr. Redwood's description of the process, which we've all just listened to, was entirely right. That is to say that there is we thought we joined in 1975 a union of sovereign states, and if we can sustain that position to reverse certain trends and be part of a common market of sovereign states, and if Mr. Cameron can obtain, and again I don't think one's going to seek for perfection, but if he can obtain a settlement in his negotiations which takes us back towards that position, I think it would be churlish not to acknowledge that. I think it's very difficult for the Prime Minister. It clearly requires treaty change. That in turn requires the assent of each of the, I believe it's 27 other European countries. And in those cases, I imagine that I would, if he did succeed, I think I can imagine saying yes, I want to stay in the European Union. And of course, if he doesn't, there is going to be this moment when we have to decide that we're going to say no. I haven't made up my mind, but I do think I must do so. It would be cowardice not to, in a matter of such enormous consequence. I think it was worth one or two points about the no campaign, even when it is fought. I think it's very important to be clear that we mustn't have the kind of unfairness and state control which characterised the 1975 lying campaign about British entry into Europe. Broadly, the BBC was captured by the British state, in this as in so many other ways, and became a propaganda machine for pumping out lies for the Yes campaign in 1975. And that needs to be stopped. I think Fleet Street we need to watch. In 1975, it's a brilliant fact, this. There were 3 newspapers in favour of no, staying out of Europe. They were, in turn, the Morning Star, communist paper, and the Spectator, which then enjoyed a circulation of 11,000. It had very sound views, but very low readership. Extraordinary. Maybe there's a lesson there. And the Dundee Courier. And now this moves us on to the my next observation, which is it is clear that over the last 2 weeks that the Yes campaign is winning. The Mail on Sunday had a report, which I think is probably true, that Mr. Murdoch, the American citizen who was born in Australia and controls 40% of the British press, great supporter of British freedoms, of course, and he is thinking he will be coming out for Europe, for European Union. Actually, it's a very interesting thing about the Sun. It's fascinating, and John Redwood will be particularly feel it a bit bitterly, as will you, Barry. I mean, in the Sun, in general elections in 1997, 2001, and then we had a series of Tory leadership elections. The Tory leadership elections, the Sun would always support the most right-wing Conservative candidate and the one who wanted to leave Europe. In general elections, the Sun would always support Tony Blair and New Labour, i.e. the one who wanted to stay in Europe. Now, Murdoch, what we're learning here is that Murdoch wants to be close to power. He'll calculate who's going to win and support that. At the moment, that's something which makes me feel uneasy. There's an intensely close relationship between the Conservative government and the Murdoch press. They're back to the same relationship which existed pre the phone hacking scandal and embarrassed the Prime Minister so much when the closeness of that relationship emerged is back in business. Everything's back to normal. John Whittingdale is the Culture Secretary. Now, and I think we have to bear in mind that you knows. I just gained the impression from you knows that most of this audience want out. I think you need to bear in mind you're going to be lonely. I remember in 1975, wasn't it? It was Foot and Powell, and no press support, big business, the trade unions, the whole lot, the whole shooting match, the British establishment, the Foreign Office. All for membership, and all lying all about it. The next point is, I think I'm going to address directly Mr. Aker's argument, because I think he's misguided, and if people in this room are going to listen to him, the no vote will be very low indeed. I'm a great admirer of Nigel Farage, a huge admirer, and I've supported him all along. I think he's done wonderful things for British democracy, and I do think he's reinvented town hall politics. If you put Mr. Farage in charge of the Out campaign, the Out campaign will get about 13 or 14% of the vote. Mr. Farage has a lot of supporters, probably many of them in this room, and they're all going to vote against Europe. If you want to win over wavering voters, Mr. Marmite Farage is not the man. And I don't mean that he's a bad person, I think he's done wonderful things. If you're going to win 50% plus, and I think John made a very important point, that actually want it to be much more than 50%. It needs to win a national argument. It can't be Mr. Farage. Of course he can rally his supporters. The people you're going to have to win are women. At the moment, I think about 20% of women in this country are going to support out. You're going to need 50%. Mr. Farage, you're going to really have to think about this. Mr. Farage it's such a pity that he didn't. I mean, he should have stayed up. Why he unresigned, by the way. Suzanne Evans is a much more plausible person to make the case. Well, I know that if you want to talk to yourselves in this room and be absolutely and guarantee Britain's continued membership of the European Union, come what may, Mr. Farage is the way to do it. I think it's a very, very profound and rich argument. It's going to have to find people who are not white middle-class males. That includes me, Mr. Redwood, Mr. Legg, and Mr. Akers. You're going to have to find really exciting people, black people, lots of women. You've got to accept that we are not going to determine this argument. And if it's going to be made, it's got to be a big, generous argument made by people who are not going to be expected. And that's really my second and my main point. That if we're serious about winning this campaign, and as I say, I don't know which way I will fall, but if it does come to a campaign to take Britain out of Europe, we need to think very, very carefully about how we win it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Now the opportunity arises for you to ask questions. Can I have a question from the gentleman there on the gangway? The microphone is just coming.
Tim Aker from the New Forest East. Would you agree that the cost of a membership of the EU is not just £13 billion, it's much higher than that with all the regulations that we have on our industry? And the other thing is that Teddy gave away a multi-billion pound natural regenerating resource, which was the fishing industry. And every year we have to go to the Brussels, like Oliver Twist, and beg for more fish. And in the meantime, our quota is so low that we're throwing back fish in the sea dead. And at the same time, we're importing £2.75 billion, which is the secret industry figures, in order to make up for the fish that we lost. So therefore, would you agree that one of the things that we need to repatriate back is our fishing industry?
Thank you very much indeed. I think John Redwood entered the House of Commons in 1987. And I think he's given his views on the EU fishery policy and the costs on a number of occasions since then. So maybe I can ask John just to speak briefly on those 2 points.
I agree. The tax cost is the gross cost. We only ever told the net cost, which is 12 billion, but that's after the money that comes back. The gross cost that we have to raise in taxes is nearer 16 or 17 billion. And then there are the substantial additional costs imposed by regulations, competitive and conduct. I think the total extra cost may be as much as 100 billion. I think that may be a little over the top, because I suspect we've imposed quite a few of those regulations and we've been free to make our own decisions. Quite a lot of them emanate from world agreements, not just from European ones, but there is a substantial additional cost on business from regulation. And I think the degradation and decline of our fishing grounds is one of the worst consequences of our membership so far. Whenever I visited Lowestoft or some of the other former great ports, it was heartbreaking to see how few vessels mountained by their trade, the grounds have been damaged, and that has been coterminous with our period in the common fisheries policy. It will not be easy to reverse it. There have been some changes negotiated recently which are helpful, getting rid of the practice of throwing small fish back into the sea dead, which never seemed to make a lot of sense, but there are still other problems with the policy.
Thank you. Tim, would you like to comment on those two issues?
Thank you for your question, Terry. On the cost of the EU, taxpayers' alliance calculated it's 120 billion. And that was a few years ago, so how many more it is after that? Obviously, I dread to think. But on the fisheries policy, this has been a problem going on for years. So why has nothing been done? And I quote a very wise man when I say, no change, no chance. If we don't change the way that we are doing things, then nothing is going to come about as a result for the fishing communities. You look at the deprivation, not just up in Grimsby, but other coastal towns up and down the country, and there is no hope there. Absolutely no hope. And the message is getting out there. We've got to, we're not in the position where we were in the 1970s with the referendum. The established press and the established media have never been held in low regard. I mean, when you've got Sun in Scotland saying vote SNP, and the Sun in England saying vote Conservative to stop the SNP, I think that tells you as much as the credibility of the established press. We've got social networks, we've got new media, we've got the internet to get these arguments out there. And the more of us that there are putting these arguments to voters who all persuasions and none on the political spectrum, we can win the argument. But it comes with actually reaching out, getting the public meetings, getting the message out there, mobilising the millions of people out there. And when you ask the question, and it's not just a case of do you think the European Union is a good idea or a bad idea, should we be in the European Union or not? The one thing that Linton Crosby had spot on, was asking people what would make you change your vote. And it's up to us to get the research, to speak to the individual voters on the doorstep and say, Terry, nice to meet you, what would make you change your vote? And then putting the arguments to them so that we can actually convince the people one by one to change their vote. And that's what it's going to take. Ignore the bluster from the establishment press and so on. We've got to mobilise, and there are plenty of groups out there. But when, after the June Council and the renegotiation has happened, we'll be able to mobilise, we'll be able to get out there, we'll be able to put the case, and then we'll be able to muster enough support to lead. It's early days yet, but I certainly think from the conversations I've had up and down the eastern counties and the country as a whole, that when you put the argument to the people and say, Terry, what matters to you, what would make you change your vote to leave the European Union, there's enough of a case to leave that we can convince people. It's time consuming, it's going to take a lot of effort, but we can do it. We can do it.
Do you want to comment at all on these points, Peter?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, good, excellent. Okay, I'll take a question from the gentleman on the second row. Here it comes.
I'll speak about my point of view. I have the greatest admiration for John Redwood because he's one of the leading Eurosceptics which has brought this referendum about. But doesn't he find it discouraging to hear his own leader say he wishes to remain in the European Union, and also, I believe, he's proposing to whip ministers against the no vote. Thank you.
John, what's going to happen if John Major makes his ministers stand by collective responsibility? Sorry, what did I call him? John Major. I'm sorry. I wonder why I made that Freudian slip. John Redwood, of course.
You're doing exactly what your opponents wish you to do. You're now trying to split the Eurosceptic movement and pretend that our Prime Minister is not acting in our interests. You have to see this as an opportunity. And our Prime Minister, of course, is going to say that he would like a successful negotiation and he would like to be able to recommend that negotiation. He has to try and deal with Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Hollande and all the others. And I think he is right to go on a tour at the moment without saying what he's trying to get, because he needs to have intelligence. If you don't understand negotiating at all, please try and just listen to what's happening and live in the real world, because he is your Prime Minister. He is your Prime Minister. You wouldn't have got any of this without Mr. Cameron and the Conservatives doing this. If you had any other kind of government likely to be elected, you would have had none of this and no opportunity. So understand this is an intelligent man doing what he thinks is right for our country. And his first task is to try and find out what, if anything, is on offer. And you don't immediately get people on side in other capitals if you start by saying, of course, I just really want to leave you. And that is not his position, it's not what he's trying to do. And when it comes to managing his government, he of course wishes to be in the position in 3, 4, 10 months' time, whatever it is, and having a deal which he can recommend, and he would like all his ministers to agree with him. He may or may not be in that position. You think he won't be in that position. He is not going to say to ministers, please have a public row about your stance on Europe now while I'm trying to handle the negotiations. He'd be quite wrong to do that. He has to have a strong working unit, his top team, the Foreign Secretary, Chancellor himself and other relevant ministers, trying to unite to get the best possible deal. So he is telling ministers they have to toe the line. When we get to the decision, which I described to you, ministers as well as the rest of us will have to decide whether we have to vote for out or whether there is enough on offer. And at that point, if it is not clear, then there could be disagreements, and it's at that point where the Prime Minister will have to make a judgment about whether he wishes ministers to resign to fight for out, or whether he would rather they stay in the tent. I think it would depend entirely on how marginal the deal is and how many ministers are involved.
Tim Aker.
Well, that's quite incredible. Since when did a public row become debate? Is that in the best Orwellian speak that we can do of the new speak of this Cameronian agenda? David Cameron, John, I didn't interrupt you. Please allow me to go. I hope somebody called that at the start, because it was a case of trust David Cameron, trust David Cameron, trust David Cameron. People gave up trusting David Cameron on the Europe issue back in 2009 when he promised us a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. And I tell you what, I hope Nicola Sturgeon gets a very nice Christmas card from David Cameron, because without her, he would not have the majority he has. This is not a mandate for anything David Cameron has said or done. If it was, then Ed Miliband would be in Downing Street. But you can rest assured that from now on, if we're in a position to judge this government, to have ministers like Philip Hammond, who said that Britain should leave the EU unless there is no treaty change, and a Prime Minister who says, you must stay in government or shut up, when the very people you're negotiating with have said you're not going to get any treaty change whatsoever, then frankly, we're back where we are in 2009. You cannot trust the Conservative Party on this. It got very partisan very quickly in John Redwood's answer, and we're hearing the same again and again and again. And if it wasn't for UKIP holding their feet to the fire on this, believe you me, we are not going away. And you try and diddle us over this referendum, you won't have the SNP to worry about in 2020. You'll have a block of 100 UKIP MPs to worry about.
Thank you. Can I have a question from the gentleman on the front row?
Roger Kendrick. The whole thing is so negative. Peter talks about taking us out of Europe. We're now within a no campaign. It's all negative. Now, it seems to me that the 80% of the world trade is outside Europe. It's the bit that's growing. It's going to be 90% of world trade in 10 or 15 years' time. The Eurozone is an economic disaster area. The European Union is going backwards. All of the regulation, even George Osborn at the CBI 2 weeks ago said the EU got itself into a position where it was hopelessly uncompetitive internationally. So can't we talk positively about what this country could achieve if we tackle the world, not be stuck in Europe? Let's have a positive vision.
Tim, would you want to open up on this one, please?
Roger, I fundamentally agree with you. Wouldn't it be great if we could negotiate our own trade deals? Next week in Strasbourg, the European Parliament is voting on a report, a minor one at that, on TTIP, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Not something that's heard much outside of political circles, but one that makes a great deal of potential cause of concern for many people. I'm getting emails by the day about it. Yeah, let's have our own trade agreements. You know, these messages need to be going up. As I said to Terry, that we need to start mobilising the grassroots effort to let people know what the European Union does, how it does it covertly, and how we need to be much better off out. But the problem is, you mentioned the euro. This government is committed to the euro. They're committed to the euro regardless of the catastrophe that's engulfing southern Europe. George Osborn said time and time again that this government believes in the euro, believes in a strong euro, even though they've said they will not join it, thank God, not yet anyway. That this government supports the euro. Why? What logical explanation is it to support a currency that creates 56% youth unemployment in some parts of southern Europe? Now, I sit with Italian MPs in the European Parliament, and they give us horror stories of people who have nothing. Whole generations that have been sold out on the cause of ever closer union. And the one thing this government could do, one thing David Cameron could do when he sat there at the June Council with all the other heads of government in the European Union, say, sorry guys, game up, no more euro. He couldn't do that. Why has he said it? There is a wide open opportunity, and I couldn't join this, there is a wide open opportunity. Why has he said it? Because the terms of negotiation are nil. I've heard time and time again from Conservative MPs about the time they try to renegotiate the Strasbourg sessions. 12 times a year we have to go to Strasbourg, which is impossible to get to. And they try to limit it from 12 to 11. Oh no, said the European Court of Justice, making that time. So what chance is there of renegotiating Euro membership, freedom of movement, the European Convention on Human Rights, when you can't even renegotiate travelling to Strasbourg from 12 to 11 times a year? It is a joke.
I agree that we need a positive campaign. That is why I spoke to you about prosperity and democracy. Prosperity and democracy are wanted by most of our fellow citizens. They are unifying ideas. You can be left-wing or right-wing, centre or no political persuasion. But it is very difficult to disagree with the idea that you'd like more rich people to be more prosperous, and that you would like us to live in a free society where voters can instruct and politicians can deliver. And that is my recommendation to you all, that we unite around those central propositions in an overarching campaign. Because if we are fighting for out of the European Union, as we may well be together, Peter may join us, I may be with you. You never know. But I can tell you this, if you don't have me and Peter, I don't think you're going to get very far, because we're not enough. We need to get thousands of other people, hundreds of thousands, millions of other people. And we're going to need to get a lot of good names from Labour and from people of no party. And you must therefore choose big, important themes that are true and that matter, whatever your position on the political spectrum. And I do believe. We have all too many good tunes, and our task will be which are our best tunes, which are our best songs. And we are the future, and we should be positive about that. We've all agreed on something on this platform, I'm delighted to say, that we all think it would be better got into the euro, we also all agreed that we could probably domestically choose policies which promoted cheaper energy or more successful industry than we've been able to do under the constraints of Europe. So it's those kind of issues which unite more people and reach out to Labour supporters and to Liberal Democrat supporters, those that still remain, any other endangered species, because now is the time to welcome them and to say, you must see that our policies are prosperity and democracy.
On which note, would you mind if I wouldn't, Robert, I'm going to speak at the British Cartoonists Association annual dinner, at which it is the 200th anniversary of the death of the great immortal Gilray, who was a British patriot. I think we know which side Gilray. And so if you will forgive me, I'm now going to go celebrate the life of the man who published the immortal cartoons about Napoleon and Pitt and Charles James Fox and metaphorically flew the flag during the Napoleonic Wars. Thank you very much.
Can I have a question from the gentleman in the pink shirt over there? Keep going.
Thank you. I think I'd probably be associated with the Bruges Group, whose phrase is the most beautiful colour. I feel this evening, having come to a meeting which I haven't been to for some time, a bit like Churchill's first 1945, because we all fought elections, we all fought the Eurosceptic cause, and you've had some really sound opinions as to how you're going to change the opinions of a large volume of the voting public who will decide. And it's been rubbished in a way which I do not feel reflects the way in which our founder and founders would expect. I think people should listen to, consider how you get those voters to vote for your opinion when you've considered it properly. To have people shouted down at a Bruges Group meeting like this is not in the best traditions of the Bruges Group, what it says. I wonder if your panel might have to comment.
Well, I think we're having a lively exchange of views. I don't think there's an attempt to shout anybody down. I know that most members of this audience feel extremely strong about these issues, and from time to time they like to express those feelings. I'll give the member of the panel a chance to comment briefly. No? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Gentleman on the gangway in the blue overnet shirt. Yes, you, sir.
Hugo Van Rijnberg, supporter of a left referendum. I see this very much as an asymmetric campaign, and I think we need to sort of think of it as an insurgency. Opinion polls show about 30% want in, 30% want out, about 40% want something renegotiated. So how about we set the standards of what a renegotiation actually looks like? Like EFTA, like Norway. Britain runs agriculture, fisheries, home affairs, justice, veto of single market regulations. Britain stands on the world organizations making regulations which affect the globe. We only give 3 billion and it's directly to Eastern Europe, and we use Article 112 of the single market to restrict Eastern Europe immigration to 1-year working visas, and they can only have benefits the same they get in their own country. So that if the Prime Minister doesn't get that, then he's failed. And how about we also support a EFTA referendum in September to help his mandate? Thank you for that. Tim?
Hugo, I feel much more confident sending you to EU renegotiation than David Cameron. I fear your knowledge is greater than our Prime Minister's. The point is, David Cameron's overpromised and under-delivered. We've been told time and time again he's going to get renegotiation on benefits, on border controls and everything, and yet net immigration is back up to levels where Tony Blair would only dream of. I feel that we need to be looking at the fundamental issues of government. I agree with John. This is about who governs Britain. I can sympathise, and we've had many discussions, many times about EFTA and articles and so on, but the people in the street need to be aware, just as I mentioned to Roger not so long ago, that this is, people think they're in a common market, this is a trade area, and that they don't understand what powers the European Union has accumulated. We need to explain to them what the European Union is now about, hear their reply, and then ask them what would actually change their vote to get them to vote to leave the European Union. It's that simple. It's 2 exchanges on the doorstep. Believe me, I've been through one of the most tiresome, tiring, bloody election battles in the country. And speaking to people, you don't get a lot of time on the doors. You've got 30 seconds to keep that door open. And you've got to ask them the questions. What actually do they think the European Union is? Tell them what the European Union actually is contrary to what they believe it is. And then ask them, well, we both disagree. This is what the European Union is. Now how or why can I get you to change your vote? It is that simple. I think complicating the issue and talking about articles and so on, as important and fundamental as they are, we're not at that level. I feel this is going to be a referendum about who governs Britain, who controls our borders. One of the key functions of the state is controlling the outside territory of a country. We don't. David Cameron doesn't. And the more people know that the European Union controls our borders and decides who can come here, the more people will vote to leave. Because it's young people, I class myself as one of them, that are growing up in communities with massive youth unemployment. No chance, no hope. Now you knock on their doors and say that, oh, we're part of the trading bloc. Well, yeah, we're part of the trading bloc, but do you know the European Union, under the US programme, advertises 800,000 UK jobs to unemployed EU workers made unemployed by the Eurozone crisis, who get grants to come to the UK for interview and grants to be settled. But if you're going from a Green Park to Great Yarmouth, what do you think you get? That's a winner. And it puts home the point and the reality that the only people who benefit from this relationship are the establishment big business and people who are on cheap labour. And the more we use it's not about tokenism, it's not about saying one person can relate to one person or another. We're all struggling. We're all British. I don't care where they've come from, I don't care what religion they have. We're all here fighting, struggling for a better life for ourselves and the generation that comes. And the only way we can get that is to convince these people, our community, our neighbours and friends, that we are much better off outside this political construct of the European Union.
John, you invite me to consent to 2 propositions, which I willingly do. The first is, does there have to be some kind of generally agreed idea of what would be acceptable renegotiation? I think those who would like to be in the campaign need to formulate that very quickly. If they don't like the formulation some of us already put forward, I've given you my formulation. You can use it or you can improve on it. Because I spend time criticising it and we just waste more time. We need to get on setting out what we're trying to achieve. And you then invite me to agree that in due course the campaign will envision what Britain looks like outside the EU, of course it will. And the sooner we can get an agreed version of that for the possibility of our campaign, the better. And I go back to what I was saying about reassuring people. The vision has to be reassuring. People need to know that their jobs will not be at risk, that there will be more jobs, not fewer jobs. They need to know that high-paid jobs might be more likely rather than less likely. They need to know that it doesn't in any way threaten their defence arrangements because they are through NATO. For instance, future
saying to me, we're getting very nervous about Russia, and I said, well, I don't understand that our defence rests on NATO, and it really depends on having America engaged as well as France and Germany, because America happens to be rather alarmed. And we are not proposing to start on that in any way. We need to get over those very, very basic points. We don't want to change everything. That our defence arrangements, our Commonwealth, our international trade, these are all things that we should support. Otherwise, people will nervously vote for the oligarchy.
Thank you. Do you want to make another quick point?
I do. Because when we talk about defence arrangements, let's not forget, it's this government and the previous coalition government that savagely cut defence spending. And when you put that into comparison with the increase in spending of our EU contributions, the increase in spending of our foreign aid, yet servicemen returning to P45s, I find it quite fantastic that we can say, oh, this is about defence, when look what the Prime Minister's done with their own defence spending. It is outrageous. No, defence experts are saying this is incredible what we're doing to cut our defence spending. Mercifully, there were some Conservatives, I think Julie Lewis was one of them, saying you cannot go below the 2% NATO spending requirement. But look what's already happened. I mean, what if you're sending in a Prime Minister to negotiate on behalf of this country when he has increased foreign aid and cut defence spending? Why are you trusting him?
I'm Michael Taylor, a retired businessman. I've been involved with Bruges Group for many years now, and on one or two occasions I've said, look, ladies, Carnegie Group, I don't say there are 70 organisations against the euro and against I'm sorry, there were 70 organisations 50 years ago against the European Union and against the euro withdrawal. And the Bruges Group had to tackle with lots of different organisations speaking together. But UKIP became the only political party that could set up the current election. And I don't know the reason for that. But there's one very interesting point that I have just in that period of time, and that is, where does this idea come from that people want the EU are like a win? It's a neighbour. It takes time. Bless his cotton socks and his wealth and his titles and his family in Europe. How come they were the anti-EU people and the Conservatives were the pro? And now somebody returned. My answer to that is, I believe, one image from the chair, I believe it's the BBC.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll just take another question so that the panel can sweep these points out afterwards. You, sir, corner.
Thanks very much. My name is Owen Bennett, I'm a journalist from the Huffington Post. I'd like to get the views from the panel. What happens if Nigel Farage is the leader of the Out campaign?
Okay, that's a pretty straightforward question. I'll start with John Redwood.
I think it's unlikely and I don't wish to comment.
Tim?
We win. It is that simple. I was in a very tight seat. I mean, thorough, you've been to thorough. For people who don't know about it, it is South Essex, former industrial, a large Labour vote. It's been conservative twice, in 87 and 2010 and 2015. It's gone against the grain, it's very independently minded. We had a public meeting at the Service Town institution of exceptional review, and we packed it. Now, could, I'm not going to name people, but could the usual suspects of the Eurosceptic movement have packed the Service Town? Hell no. We've got to reach out to Labour voters in the north, and the surge in the UKIP vote up in the north, north of Birmingham, was exceptional. Had Conservative voters not voted tactically to keep Labour in place in Henry Middleton, John Middleton would have been a UKIP MP. we're seeing an incredible increase in the votes in judicial local areas for UKIP, for the outlaws that Nigel Farage is reaching out to. Now, I said in my talks that everyone has a vital role to play, and it's incumbent on all of us wherever we go. You know, John Redwood was going to marshal all the outvotes in Woking. I'm going to marshal the votes in Thurrock. But there are people and political leaders who can reach other parts that aren't political leaders can reach. And that is Nigel Farage. And he has managed to do it for the first time in 100 years. The universal franchise, a party that wasn't red, wasn't blue on the national election, that was European elections last year. That is something. And it was done under the leadership of the only political leader who can reach areas, who can reach non-voters, and get that turnout up, and get people out to vote to leave the European Union. And that man is Nigel Farage.
I'll just briefly comment on your question, sir. Like it or not, there will have to be accountability when we actually get to the campaign. Because the Electoral Commission are going to decide which organisation is the most representative of our side of the argument. So we do need to be thinking of how we're going to work together to get the most effective organisation and get that approval. Thank you. Yes, you said it. Yes. The gentleman behind you, actually, in the chair.
How can you reconcile your claim that David Cameron is serious about renegotiation of Europe with Kevin Clark's claim yesterday on the BBC to the 12-hour deal that there were no major powers on the table?
I agree with Mr. Cameron. I think Mr. Cameron has every incentive to undertake serious negotiation. Mr. Cameron well knows that we will be voting for out and we will not be supporting any suggestion.
What about the acting community?
If there isn't substantial change, and he's made clear the changes he wants at a high level in his previous speech.
I could be cheeky and say we're a long way away from the days where John Redwood would agree with Ken Clark. Well, I'm not going to be resentful of that. Ken Clark, let's sit. There are no powers. He's only parroting what other leaders are saying. The same people around the table at the June summit are going to be facing David Cameron. How many times does David Cameron have to hear the word no and actually believe it? I find it ridiculous. There's some of his hearing checked. It is absolutely ridiculous. He has had no chance of reforming benefits or freedom of movement so far, even as far as the Liberal Democrats would let him go. What chance is there for him to get fundamental renegotiation with control our borders, with control our benefits, with write our own laws, with control our fisheries, with control our agriculture? I mean, Hugo would have a tough task trying to get all that with his adept negotiating skills. David Cameron, absolutely not. You can only judge this horse by its form. It should be put out to pasture long ago.
Yes, stand on the second row with the white shirt there.
Thank you. I'm very much reminded by what both our experiences said last year. But also what our chair said, there doesn't need to be an overarching group. I'm not as yet concerned about who is to lead on that, despite whatever my own preferences are, which will include the fact that I was actually at school with Mr. Farage a few years younger than me, so he goes to the best details asking what his school-wide answers were. However, this is going to need planning. We already see, even with comments in the evening standard tonight, various other members of the press, that the pro-European campaign has started to be encouraged. I would tend to agree with Mr. Redwood. It is not the time to actually start firing things out. However, as an organisation, how is it going to come together? Because there's going to be possibly a great deal of money, donors and what have you. We need an overarching organisation. The leadership of whoever takes it will sort itself out once that overarching organisation
Tim?
I quite agree, and there are numerous organisations that are coming together, and particularly one that strikes me interest, as I mentioned, which is Business of Britain, which has been a very slow burn campaign to bring business round to the fact that you can renegotiate and ask the European Union whatever you want, but if you don't agree with ever closer union, you ain't getting it. And to win people around slowly and gradually, particularly in the business community, that the European Union is not going to change. And every month in Strasbourg, with the dodgy Mexican ways of voting going on, it's not going to affect or help their daily lives. So I think Macro and Business of Britain have an invaluable role to play. But what gets me is that there was a rush in the press so soon after the ballot boxes were put away that Nigel Farage had to get sued, which I think is ridiculous. And if you're looking at actually reflecting and taking time and thinking, well, hang on, we've got some time for this, might not be a long time, but we've got some time to take stock and look at which areas we need to look at. As the gentleman said there, you know, it's not a left-right issue, it's a right-wrong issue. And whoever we talk to on the doorstep, we have to put the arguments to what will make them change their vote, because that's the only way we can win. When it comes to the pro-EU campaign, it started fantastic. I've paid for Peter Mandelson to on the television. I'd love for Tony Blair. Tony Blair's getting fired as the quartet Middle East envoy. I only hope to come back and lead the Yes campaign. But we have some competition with David Cameron on that. You know, let them do what they do. We always said in our campaign, we have a set plan. We are not going to be driven off it by the antics of the others. We know what's right. We understand the British people better than the inside. We know their hopes, aspirations, and the future that they want for themselves and their families. And we are best ones to articulate it. I agree. Let's take some time. Let's reflect. Let's look at who we need to target, where and when. But let's not rush to actually say, well, from the get-go, you're not in. Because I think that's very unhelpful.
Thank you. I'll take a question from the gentleman right at the back of the room.
Can I ask Mr. Redwood this question?
Sorry, Sam, I was directing to the gentleman at the back.
Yes, how about a lady?
We'll have a lady after we've heard from the gentleman.
My question was to Mr. Redwood. Actually, I do actually agree with you a little bit that Mr. Farage might not be the right person to lead, but, and this is a big but, you obviously stick your nose up UKIP and Mr. Farage a little bit, but at the moment, Farage and UKIP are the only people speaking up for Brexit. All these Tory Eurosceptics, including yourself, you can't even admit that you're actually voting out, so why should we be listening to you? That's exactly why Farage and UKIP are at the moment the leading voice in this campaign.
John?
I'm being extremely careful not to make any criticism of Mr. Farage or of UKIP. I've been working very hard to get you all to understand that we need to get together and that we need to speak in tone and terms that address many people out there who don't get to agree with us, rather than constantly talking to each other about whether our doctrines and views are pure enough or not. And I really would urge you to think carefully about that sound advice. You heard also from Mr. Oborn, who is a Eurosceptic commentator, and we learned from Mr. Oborn that he isn't sure that people want out. It depends. So we need to proceed carefully and sensibly. We need to be making our plans now so that we have the right campaign ready when we get to that point.
Tim?
It saddens me that someone who's learned about the European Union, the evolution of the European Union, be so half-hearted in their approach at this point in time. I grew up in politics and so on, reading your books, John, and you were a great inspiration. But to be on the panel where now, after the Lisbon Treaty, after everything, after every battle that you have fought against and lost, you still say we might stay in the European Union, I might vote to stay in. I find that absolutely ridiculous and disingenuous to the people listening here tonight and people who see it on YouTube and so on, to see that you can say, after everything, after the 300,000 net immigration, after the complete reduction of our fishing waters, of everything else, for you to say, I might just think about staying in and not commit. I think that's very disingenuous. I'm very disappointed.
Please listen to what I'm saying. I've said that I wish to work with you to restore a British democracy. I wish us to be able to make the main decisions that matter to Britain, which at the moment include borders. I mean what I say. But if you just spend your whole time shouting at people that they've got to leave tomorrow, you're not going to win. You've got to
Tim, what chance do you think of us really getting a referendum that's going to be honest and open about what we are really voting for? Considering that the EU are funding the BBC and the CPI, with their income, and their propaganda, and what have we got in place should the EU, and we do vote to come out, to say we've made a mistake and you need to go back because you didn't understand the question in the first place, and we're offering you something like this, like they did with the Irish Lisbon Treaty. See, what chance have we got of getting a really true referendum on this issue?
Thank you very much. Tim Aker.
We have to be vigilant. I think that what we've seen so far, this is the only time you're going to hear me praise that. Better coming to say that the EU citizens of the UK will not vote, I think is welcome. But we have to be more vigilant. I fully foresee during the referendum campaign that all of the three leaders will get together like they did in the Scottish independence referendum and come up with their most sincere rhetoric saying, trust us, staying, we'll get a better deal for you. And that might just deal us. I think the process is the problem. I personally think that we've heard the right things. I'm waiting to see them. actually on paper before I believe them, but it's travelling the right way. The behaviour of the other parties, well, I'm not their responsibility, they'll do what they want. But if they dare try and fiddle us out of a outgo, I'm quite confident that we will be in a stronger position than Nicola Sturgeon in 2020, and that you will have the destruction of not just the Conservative Party, but any party that tries to stay in. As I said, it is an opportunity to sweep away all of the politicians of all stripes who have decimated our energy industry, decimated our fishing industry, completely destroyed communities up and down this country with their policy of open borders. That's a great opportunity for national renewal, and I think the British people will take it. When it comes to people like the CBI and all of those others that say we should join the euro, how fantastic that would have been. I think that people will see that they were wrong then, and they're wrong now, and will see past it. Establishment opinion and media has never been disgusted before as it is now. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to get the social networks, get to the social media, find new ways of campaigning, to get people to reject the old political class and to vote to leave the EU.
Thank you.
Of course we can have an honest open referendum. We will legislate in Parliament in a normal way. It will be organised in a normal way as our elections are always organised. And it is up to each side to field their best speakers, put forward their best arguments, to raise as much money as they can, given the popularity and the worth of their cause. So be a good cheer. It doesn't help if people who have a very strong view go around telling people they're going to lose. It doesn't help if they tell us that they rather fight battle some other day rather than the day when the battle is to be joined. This is a huge opportunity. I'm very optimistic about it. I think it could be a liberation of our country. I sincerely hope it will be. One way or the other, either because we get our democratic protections by negotiation, or because we win the vote for out and create a relationship. Maybe we won by withdrawing first. You cannot do it without taking British people with you. You cannot do it by being defeatist, and you cannot do it by imposing ever greater tests of loyalty and ideological purity.
Thank you. I'll take two final questions. The lady on the third row there, please.
Sorry, I actually appreciate what the lady back there said about the pressure of the money that can be spent. I don't think that's quite answered. I would like to know whether Mr. Cameron would consider doing something about that.
Okay. The gentleman 2 rows behind you.
What worries me most about this whole business is that the architects of the European project never explained that this is actually about the formation of the United States of Europe. And that closer political union means that. The consequences of having the United States of Europe, of course, are you have to have freedom of movement, you have to have a common currency and so on. So if people had understood when the common market was formed, that this was just a strategy along the route, and that after that it would be EEC, and then it would be closer political union, and eventually, after maybe 100 years, who knows, it would become the United States of Europe. If people have that in mind when they go to the referendum, they may say, we'll stay, as Peter Osborn said, we'll stay in what was the common market. Trouble is that between Rome and Lisbon, there's been creep in every treaty to set up the formations you need to form the United States of Europe.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to speak for the government on whether there should be limits on the money spent. I think it should be equal. I think there should be rigorous checks to make sure, because you bet your bottom dollar or your bottom euro that the Commission will throw everything at it to keep us in. They can't lose our £55 million today. They can't lose our jobs market, which they send their unemployed to work in. So that's a question for the government. Am I hopeful that they'll be scrutinising it to a standard? No. As the gentleman said, if people knew where we were going in the European Union, would they vote for it? Obviously not. But we are all interested in politics. We have given up our evenings to come and listen and debate. Millions of people have not, despite the excellency. They've not come to hear us. They've not come to take part in the debate. That's why everything I've been saying is we've got to speak to people and find out what would influence their vote, what would make them change their vote. And Mr. Smith might not like the EU flag, so they say, well, we don't want that. And he might say, fantastic. Mrs. Jones might say, well, I'm worried about 2 million jobs. So, well, Lord Lee Jones said we wouldn't lose any jobs. We said it was CPR, which actually supports the European Union, so hardly a partisan reference. It's about micro-targeting and finding out what would make people change their vote. And to pursue any other strategy would be counterproductive, because it's the people that matter. John and I are public servants, we serve the people in one capacity or another, and the people come first. And we have to respond to their demands, their beliefs, their prejudices. And that's the way it is. We're a representative democracy, the people come first. And it's about mobilising. There will be more people on the ground campaigning for out than will be campaigning for in. And it's about targeting, reaching people, and having those conversations, which is what is the democratic process, and which is what we're all about.
Thank you. John?
I agree that we need to look at the money issue, and I will take that away from this meeting. And I do favour control over expenditure in elections. We have very sensible controls over spending in general elections. The Electoral Commission will, of course, also be supervising the referendum. There are already some very clear rules from the Electoral Commission to try and ensure fairness. I will look at money. But again, be a good heart, and we may be able to raise more money than we think. Money doesn't always work, and I've this morning been signing on my expenses to go election. The person who thought he had most chance of defeating me put out many more leaflets than I did. He spent a lot of money on having them delivered by for-profit companies, whereas I was relying on volunteers and free posts. So he spent a lot more than I did, but he didn't win. So it isn't always money that wins. You have the right arguments, the right approach to election, that you can win by spending less. On the wider issue of the United States of Europe, for some of us it was always obvious that was the intention of most of these people. As a very young man, one of my very first votes was in the then EDC Common Market referendum. I made a mistake then, reading the Treaty of Rome, which was then the treaty basis of the proposition, and I could see the Treaty of Rome as not just a common market. And right at the beginning in the Treaty of Rome, it said ever closer union, which tried to mean eventual merger of countries and political union, exactly the journey that many think they are still on, and they are getting quite a lot further than one might have expected. So it was obvious at the time, voted no in 1975. And in 1975, can teach us a lot. Those who remember or those who just read about it. The Our campaign, which I spoke for as a young man, lost very heavily because it didn't speak to enough people in the middle, because it didn't have any business support of any kind. It didn't know how to deal with what the establishment was saying, and the establishment just kept saying this was a common market, a trade arrangement, if we pulled out, we would lose our jobs. Well, we can learn from that. I trust we will have.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've had an outstanding debate this evening, and it's been led by two dedicated public servants. Their views may have differed, but their dedication and their sense of service and their will to get Britain out of the European Union came through. And I would like all of you to thank them for the tremendous contribution they made this evening to Oborn.
very much.